All right, Blake, let's start off with the timeout that was called by Nick Nurse with 3:05 left to play in regulation. The Raptors on a 10-0 run. Actually, Kawhi Leonard on a 10-0 run had taken a 6-point lead. Nurse calls the timeout, and from there the Warriors go on a 9-2 run to finish it off. Why the timeout in that moment?
Yeah, the way Nick Nurse explained it after the game was that, first of all, those two timeouts, the Raptors would have lost them. Teams can only enter the final 3 minutes with two timeouts to kind of keep the game from getting too dragged out late. Nurse basically said that those were use it or lose it timeouts. They wanted to use it. They wanted to get a little extra rest for their guys. Personally, I thought that probably stood to benefit Golden State a little more. Golden State looked pretty tired during that Raptors run. They were obviously thinned out. They were having trouble guarding Kawhi Leonard. I thought it's an okay gamble on Nurse's part, but I thought that it probably benefited the Warriors more just to let them get settled and get a breather. And the Raptors may have been better suited just running through it.
Yeah, and they could have given the ball, I guess, to Fred VanVleet or to Kyle Lowry to allow them to maybe take some of the heat off of Kawhi Leonard, who, by the way, was fantastic again in that fourth quarter. But he only had 14 points through the first three quarters, not his exceptional self, certainly what we've been used to seeing in these NBA Finals. What reasons do you see or did you see as to why that was?
Yeah, I mean, foremost, I thought Andre Iguodala did a really nice job most of the night. Klay Thompson saw some of the assignment too, and obviously anyone who's guarding Kawhi one-on-one is going to have a lot of help with traps and doubles and things like that. But I thought this was the best Iguodala looked defensively all series. I thought it was probably the healthiest he looked all series. So that was a big challenge. And then, Leonard's playmaking, we've talked a little bit throughout the series, throughout the whole playoffs, how it's a little hot and cold. It's probably the weakest part of his offensive game. And there were just a couple opportunities where, Golden State showed those traps or showed those double teams, and he was just kind of trying to force it through. And I understand you want to put your team on your back, and obviously Kawhi Leonard knows that he can have a run like he did in the fourth quarter there, but maybe just trying to force a little too much against Iguodala, against that extra help that he was seeing.
And then in the end, though, he didn't try to force too much. As you mentioned, Iguodala with the trap with Thompson, they come in and collapse on him right there at the free throw line. Final seconds, he swings it over to VanVleet, who then swings it over to Lowry in the corner, who misses at the buzzer, and the Raptors end up losing that game. But getting back to timeouts, what were your thoughts on why Nick Nurse didn't call a timeout in that moment?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So, normally the argument to not call a timeout would be you want to attack a scrambled defense and not let them get set. But an offensive foul had just been committed, so the play was dead anyway. So there are two possible explanations. The first is that Nick Nurse wanted to save a timeout in the event that the Raptors missed, and then after that needed to play the foul game and advance the ball and things like that. The second was that they didn't want Golden State to be able to make a substitution. I don't know that, to make a substitution and set their defense up a little bit better. I don't know that either of those hold. I think it was just a case if he wanted to trust his guys. I didn't love that one either. I don't think there's a huge cost to calling the timeout there, especially because with only 17 seconds left, the chances of you getting a quick shot up, getting into the foul game, or getting an offensive rebound and needing to talk it over are pretty small. In terms of the play they actually ran, everyone knew that it was going to be a Kawhi Leonard attack. The Warriors knew they had not only Iguodala there for the double, but they had a player on each side of the floor ready to triple team if he got past the double and to make those passes hard for Leonard. So tough one there all around. I thought Nick Nurse has had a really good postseason overall. Maybe not his best 3 or 4 minutes there.
Yeah, and then also that set up the final moments there was that Kawhi it looked like he was going for the 2-for-1 there in the final, 20, 30 seconds of the game there. I guess it was probably about the final 30 seconds of the game where he hurried up a shot. And while Kawhi Leonard could probably take any shot he wants at any time, it might have been a little rushed in that circumstance. But in the end, the Raptors are still, they're still on top as far as this series is concerned, and it's moving on to Oakland with the chance to close it out in Game 6. Before we get to Game 6 discussions, though, earlier in the game, the big story certainly that touched the basketball world was Kevin Durant going down with what is believed to be a torn Achilles tendon. First of all, how do you see his absence now, what appears to be done for the season, done for the rest of this series, no matter how long it goes? How will that impact now the rest of this series?
Yeah, from an on-court perspective, I think we know what that looks like. I think we saw earlier in the series what the Warriors look like without him. We know that they're a little thinned out. We know that they're probably a little bit gassed. We know that there's this huge scoring load on Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and the Raptors won 3 of those 4 games, or 2 of the 3 that Thompson played in. So things probably tilt more in Toronto's favor to close this out. Initially, I kind of thought if the Raptors lose Game 5, maybe they're in trouble because then you go to Game 6. It's at Oracle. Kevin Durant has 2 more days to get his health underneath him. Without Durant, it probably still tilts in Toronto's favor. And then from an off-the-court perspective, I mean, at least last night there was this kind of weird fog around everything where, I think all the players on both teams could only think about Durant in that moment. Both the coaches on both sides could only think about Durant in that moment. I know I had some trouble, getting to the analysis because it's such an unfortunate situation for Durant, and it's obviously for him as an individual, and then for the NBA Finals as a whole. So I don't know how long that cloud will kind of hang over things. I don't know if the 2 days off is enough that come Thursday it's back to business as usual, or if this series still feels weird. But from an on-court perspective, I think it'll look a lot like games 2 and 4 looked.
And of course, I'm sure you saw on social media, it was a firestorm as some Raptors fans. It wasn't the entire arena there. They were cheering when Durant went down and had to leave the floor. And the Raptors players were among those who were trying to silence the crowd. And eventually he left to cheers of KD. But what was your reaction to that moment?
Yeah, it was a little disappointing. I understand the explanations that there was a turnover on the play and the play went the other way, and maybe people didn't realize in the moment. And I understand that, a small number of fans does not represent the entire fan base. As someone who's from here and has kind of grown up around the team and stuff like that, it was still a little disappointing. You see clips of Jurassic Park, of the viewing parties around the country or in bars or whatever, and there is a little bit of that cheering element. Great that they corrected it. Great on Kyle Lowry and Serge Ibaka and those guys to kind of make the crowd aware of what was happening and change that tone. But the initial reaction still a little disappointing, even with the caveats that, maybe everyone didn't realize just how serious it was in the moment.
Sure. All right. Well, right now, what we know is a Game 6 Thursday night at Oracle Arena, a place where the Raptors have gone in and gotten wins here this season. How do you like their chances of getting that on Thursday night and winning the first title in franchise history?
It's always weird. Obviously, I've never covered an NBA championship run before. It feels weird, the idea of a team winning it on the road, their first ever championship. It just feels kind of off. I think the Warriors they opened as slight favorites as they were in earlier games in Oracle. The way the series has gone when Durant isn't in there, the number of things that had to go right for the Warriors to come out of Game 5 with the win. I think the Raptors probably have enough here to take it and win their first title. I'm not resoundingly confident that this isn't going to a Game 7, which would be all sorts of fun, but all sorts of tension. But the Raptors have been the better team on balance throughout the series, especially when Durant isn't available. If I had to pick, I think they'd probably take it in Game 6.
All right. Well, we will see, and certainly we're going to hear a lot more about Kevin Durant's injury, as well as all the hype leading into what will now be the final game at Oracle Arena for this season and for the history of that building and the Warriors. All right. Hey, Blake, thanks as always for jumping on with us. The good thing about this series continuing is we get a chance to keep talking to you, and I really enjoyed that, and I hope we can catch up with you one more time here, and maybe we'll have another opportunity beyond Thursday. I know the Raptors probably don't want to hear that, but we would appreciate that. Either way, let's hope that we can speak once again. Blake Murphy of The Athletic joining us. Thank you, Blake.